In this discussion period, anything can be brought up that somebody wishes to bring up, and then to respond to it as one wishes to respond to this. Would be good if not after one question is brought up, somebody doesn't immediately bring up something else, but if it is a viable question, that we all look at it together and maybe follow it through. One doesn't have to raise one's hand or just to say when somebody else isn't speaking. There's no limitation to the topic. Anything can be brought up that somebody wishes to bring up here.
I had an incident in my life that causes me still a great deal of pain and a great deal of guilt. And periodically it is re-stimulated extensively. And I play some kind of a little game of closing my eyes so I won't see anyone looking at me, and so I won't see myself and how awful I feel about it. And I wonder why it is that I don't seem to feel, or that I do some kind of holding on to it, or running away from. Yeah, I wish it were, because it seems like I worked on things in my early life that seemed to be pretty horrendous, and did a lot of therapy and forgiveness and letting go and healing, and it just seemed like when my life was really starting to work well, when my relationships were starting to work and be loving, and my work was starting to be fun, and it just seemed like this incident only happened like about 6 years ago. And it just seems so out of character with who I think I am.
Did you just say it seems so much out of character with who you think you are?
Yeah, and I heard myself say that too. And maybe I think I'm somebody.
Big what?
That I think I'm somebody who doesn't do something like that.
Or you think you're somebody who did do something like that.
Pardon?
You also think you're somebody who did do something like that.
Yeah, and that's what I about.
You mentioned that you feel guilty about this thing, and I know that with myself, things that I have a lot of guilt built up around. It seems like that guilt prevents me from really seeing the real connection between, if in fact you're doing something, and the result of that is it causes you pain. If it's really that clear, you would probably just shy away from it. Or we would just shy away from those things. But I know with myself, things that I've really built a lot of guilt around. I feel guilty about something, but I'm not sure if I'm feeling guilty because I have some idea or some image that brings this guilt up, or if it's in fact, does the pain come from committing a certain act or doing something? As it makes me feel guilty because I'm doing something that doesn't fit a nice image of myself I'd like to have. Or is it in fact a pain-producing action? This is about as clear as mud, right? Let me start again. Sometimes the guilt just prevents me from seeing, in other words, things in my life where I've been able to just let go of guilt, or not participate so much in the guilt feelings, but just look at the actions. I can say, yes, I'm doing this, and it causes a certain type of pain in relationships or something. It's not so hard to give it up that way, or it kind of just drops away. The tendency to do things when it's very clear that A produces B, and B isn't something you want to participate in. It's not so laden with a lot of unclear thinking things. But when I have guilt about things, guilt is this extra trip that's built up that kind of prevents me from seeing things really clearly. At least that's, I just noticed that kind of working, that I think it's bad to do something, but if I really look at that, why do I think this? Because I've been told that, or is it truly, in fact, something that brings about disrespectful actions or things like that? Do you understand what I'm getting at?
Did they get through that scene?
Yeah. And therefore the action continues.
Yeah. It's not clear what's happening. Is it that I just feel guilty about doing something that if I didn't feel guilty, it's really okay? Or is it really not okay?
So how do you get to the root? How do you find out what
just being aware of the guilt in action and the actual physical pain that the guilt causes. That's been helpful for me, just to see how the guilt kind of operates, unless you really question why you feel guilty or what is it about this action that makes you feel that way. Then, like some of the things that I've done in my life, it's not so bad. It's not something that needs so much condemnation. Yet the guilt makes it seem so heavy and something.
Tom?
You said something about the physical pain and the guilt, and they sort of tie in together. And I've observed for myself that sometimes I'll have some physical pain and it'll trigger whatever kind of guilt or anger or whatever. Depends on the pain, depends on the thing. And typically, at least for me, it's a running away from the quote-unquote physical pain. Not always, sometimes it goes the other way. Is this...
No, I think it's quite, well, I don't know. It might be in there somewhere, but no, I find more of like feelings of guilt and a very painful, emotional state that I feel pretty much in my stomach area. So I think it might be kind of very different than what you're talking about. You're talking about maybe some physical pain that brings up some things for you, and I'm talking about guilt, about a perception of myself committing something that doesn't fit in with an image of myself and makes me feel guilty.
What's guilt?
Sorry.
What is guilt? What is it?
I think it's a lot to do with condemning, it seems to me.
With condemning?
Yeah. Reprimand.
Is it different from remorse, or is guilt kind of a judgmental thing? And is remorse something that you genuinely feel that you've done something that has caused other people pain or yourself pain and that you don't want to do again? And can guilt be separated in some kind of condemn yourself again and again for this act without any real positive outcome from it?
Guilt is like this really strong identification with something negative about yourself, which you really, I mean, for me, it's this really strong identification with this I that did something that I feel is really bad, and I hurt somebody else, or it just keeps coming back to that strong I did something wrong. And it's real strong identity.
Being seen by others as doing something. You mentioned before that being seen by, I can't remember how you said that. But I know that's certainly in there for me.
Being seen, or maybe being found out. Maybe one hasn't been seen by others yet, but when there's this fear of being found out, and then some kind of a punishment, whatever, when they feel as punishment, others having a bad idea about oneself or rejecting.
It's a way of punishing yourself too.
It also seems to fit into patterns of wanting to feel of being separated from others. And I know for me, I've been feeling a lot of pain, sometimes lying awake feeling really guilty, thinking about people that are suffering in wars in Central America, and getting very caught up in that, and it doesn't seem to ever leave me. And I wonder why it is that I get so compelled and feeling guilty and feeling angry, and a lot of it is that the angry stuff kind of goes into these old patterns of me against others, and those people that don't do anything, and I'm not doing enough, and it's sort of almost a wallowing in those old patterns that kind of go around and around, whereas really, there's pain. Of course there's pain when you think about these mothers whose husbands and sons are dead. But all that other stuff, when it goes around and around, seems like it's just extra stuff that doesn't really help anybody or help oneself either. But it's there, and it comes up a lot sometimes. And I think that has a lot to do with guilt too. It's just something that you seem to get caught up in, going around and around. But it really doesn't have anything much to do with that action or with what we are right now.
This is, it goes around and around.
It's the thought, isn't it, that goes around and around?
In Tom's case, or I shouldn't say Tom's case, I mean, maybe all of our cases when this happens, around and around would be a lack of resolution, maybe that whether or not to continue with a particular thing, questioning it on the one hand. Maybe, this is what I'm hearing, that maybe we should just deal with these feelings of guilt, but continue. Maybe it's not the particular action that's to be questioned, but why these feelings come up about it, or seeing whether or not the guilt is sort of an extra thing anyway, but are these pain-producing actions or thoughts or habits, or they themselves something that needs to be looked at? It seems like guilt is sort of, like Jen was saying, sort of an extra thing there. But can we just look at what is actually going on, what one is doing, and try to see if it does need to be attended to, looked at it. Certainly if something continuously comes up, it seems like it's a red flag to be looked at. But of course, like was being said before, if there's a lot of feelings of guilt and should be doing and not be doing, it's difficult to even really observe and look clearly at what is going on.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I was trying to say, that the guilt is something that needs to be looked at. And maybe it depends on what it is, but if you can look at that and then it might get a feel for what that is, it might clear the way to look at these other things that bring up the guilt. Is it really something that needs to even be a problem? Or do you have some idea about it that makes it a problem? The image of yourself doing something that's the problem, or is it the actual doing it? Maybe it could be that they're two different things. The real problem is that some perception of yourself that gets threatened by doing something. It's a little hard to talk about, I think, unless you get pretty specific, but
isn't guilt sometimes a way of building up an image that's been really threatened? Like if you think of yourself as an honest person, a forthright person, and you lie, and you beat people out of some money, and the guilt feeling, with me, a lot of times is a way of, well, I'm really a good person, and the reason is that I feel guilty about what I just did. I really am an honest person, because if I were totally immoral, I wouldn't care. I'd be lying to people all the time, I couldn't allow me to do it.
I think another aspect of that is it protects you from And for myself, if I feel guilty about it, as opposed to an ongoing thing, say something particular, I did something horrible. Feeling guilty is like, maybe protects me from doing it again. Say I've hurt somebody in a relationship, as long as I continue feeling so horrible about myself, I'm never going to get that close to anyone again, because I know I'm bound to do the same thing, you know. So I keep that feeling there as kind of a wall, an image that keeps me safe from getting out there again.
Yeah, it can also prevent, you can get so caught up in feeling terrible and guilty that it's real hard to make any change in that particular relationship or particular action and make it different, because you just feel, you know, it's real stifling. It's a real stifling feeling.
It seems clear that guilt is a pretty self-indulgent activity, and is really reinforced by the way we've been brought up in a lot of ways.
Seems totally conditioned to me. You know, the whole thing is a totally conditioned response. I was talking with Toni last night about kind of horrendous psychological treatment in a sense to it in private schools, where these adult figures, these teachers, I mean, they're always right. And as a child, there's so many contradictions, but as a child you can't verbalize those things or even understand them intellectually. They're just these incredible contradictions. There's an action and you're wrong, and there's a punishment. And you're made to feel wrong. It's called bad, as opposed to something else which is good. And so it's these whole reactions about fear of punishment, fear of rejection, having love withdrawn, being deprived, out of an action that you probably don't even understand. It really feels to me it's totally conditioned, that whole thing of guilt. And the incredible thing is it takes me away all those extraneous stuff. It takes me away from what's really going on, what's really happening inside. The guttural fear or pain, whatever it is, that really needs to be looked at.
It's not so much of our inherited part, a part of our own cultural patterns that we just take and get going and going and going without breaking them.
Could you say that?
It is a part of our conditioning.
It is a
That
part?
it is a part of our condition in this that we inherit, and we are putting then the label on it. And it is guilt, without really understanding what it is, because it's our pattern. We just take it.
You know, you touched on something which gave me a funny kind of a thought. That is, you know, in school usually you're punished for doing something that you're probably really enjoying.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, but quite often it seems, you know, you're talking with somebody, et cetera, and made to feel kind of bad. And, you know, one of the things that happens with people, with myself, often is you're afraid to feel really happy because you're afraid somebody's going to punish you. And, you know, so you sort of punish yourself in advance.
You're certainly afraid to feel free.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, you know, to really allow what's there to happen and find out about it.
And there's a lot of conditioning that goes on there. You know, in school it happens in I think of any family, almost of necessity, there's some times when something has to happen, kids doing whatever they're doing, and they have to do something else, and, they feel maybe punished or whatever. Something to look at.
I was at a playground with a whole bunch of kids, about 3, 4-year-olds. And this one little kid looks at this other and says, "I don't like you." And the immediate response of the playground person, "You shouldn't say that." Which immediately, it sets up this response that I shouldn't feel that.
You shouldn't say what you feel.
Or you shouldn't say what you feel. And it creates an internal contradiction right away if that's continually gets pointed out. That's not the way you should act.
Particularly with children, and if they're 3 or 4, they'll probably work it out in about 10 minutes at the maximum.
Oh, it's gone. 2 minutes later, and the kids are playing together. Who knows what it is? So that kind of simple and honest approach response gets just covered over with all these conditioned responses.
Plus the fact that the adult who says you shouldn't say that, probably the child has heard adults say that too.
Yeah.
That's extra confusing.
Pardon, could you repeat that, please?
The adult who says to the child, you shouldn't say I don't like you, may have said this many times himself or herself, so there is this confusion in addition, that the one who tells you this is bad, somehow or other, does this kind of stuff.
Yeah. What's lacking in a person who's kind of psychopathic or something, who can do something pretty horrendous towards somebody and feel absolutely no guilt at all, and maybe can see what's going on to a certain extent, and maybe has had counseling or something, yet does these things time and time again and feels absolutely nothing. And how does that differ from somebody who does feel guilty? I mean, that's, for me, there's something genuine about guilt. I mean, there's something really useful and really, I don't know, constructive about feeling sorry. And
Feeling
Where-
sorry.
yeah, where do you separate it?
Would you make the distinction yourself between remorse and guilt? I mean, are you talking
Yeah.
about what's constructive about guilt, or are you talking about
Yeah,
remorse?
where is the separation? I mean, if guilt is conditioned, then is there an unconditioned response that guilt stems from? Or, I don't know, it's always been kind of confusing to me.
It feels to me that people who are really psychopathic and really ill are people who've had this stuff so deeply squashed inside of them that they're just not in touch with it anymore. That's my sense of it, is that as a child was so beaten and so downtrodden and so, and plus born with all kinds of tendencies towards, testing in ways with the particular parents that pushed parents to the extremes of devastating and terrible behavior of the child. I mean, it's not one or the other, it's how those children and parents respond together. That feelings are just constantly pushed down and so deeply away that these people are really out of touch. Numb. They're like numb to their feelings. It's not necessarily that they're not human anymore. It's just that the stuff has just been so destroyed in them that they just don't know it anymore.
I think that's exactly the difference, what you just said. The psychopath, he's, like you say, he's numb, or he's not in contact with his emotions, but a person who perhaps has done something which he later feels is wrong, he may initially begin to feel a bit of guilt, but he doesn't suppress that. He lets it be there and looks at it like it is, and then tries to look objectively at it, though without going on a guilt trip, so to speak. That he lets his emotions override his rational thought, in the sense that he can go ahead and then change in the future to do something which then doesn't make him feel guilty. Isn't that the difference, really? That the person who's, let's say, not a psychopath, or has no upbringing where he's, like you said before, he's numb, then he's letting that be there, but he's just looking at it objectively.
I don't know, you said something about overriding feelings. I don't, there's a difference between letting the feelings be there and looking at them clearly, and guilt, and, you know, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to do when guilt comes up, is to see it as guilt and let it go, and then just be with the feelings and let them change.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but that isn't necessary, I mean, there's a whole range of human response in between
Right.
that, and the psychopath is, you know, and all the psychopaths have different levels, but there are
Sure.
extremes.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get a feel for what Jim said, I'm just looking at it now, and comes to mind too, that isn't guilt wound up with time, in a sense, because in some way there's some sort of time gap between particular action or things said or whatever that produces this and the actual coming up with these feelings. There's some sort of time gap there. And I guess, see, the dangerous thing in what we're saying is that, well, maybe that one feels, well, can one just do anything and just deal with feeling guilty? But I think what we're trying to get at is that can an action or whatever it is be looked at right there, that and just totally seen as possible harmful or negative effects and dropped and just dealt with right there, so that there isn't this time gap of then the thinking, I shouldn't have done it, that you're just totally seen, so that there isn't this creation of this image, this me, who is now then this person who's done this thing, and then these feelings of I should have, it just...
Well, it's interesting. I long ago in my past, I did something that I felt really badly about and guilty about, and decided I'd never do it again. And yet, through the years, I've been tempted quite a few times to, do things very similar to this. And yet, that guilt has kept me from doing it. I mean, this looking back and seeing the pain that I caused the first time I did it, and thinking, well, this type of behavior is not so good. And yet I've been very tempted. I mean, it may be pleasurable, or it may be to my advantage for one reason or another in the short term to go ahead and do it. And yet there's that heavy memory.
Well, we can't call everything guilt. It's
Yes,
associated with some kind of action that you see as being pain-producing, or you feel the pain. I mean, what if you did something really horrible? Maybe not intentionally, but let's say you ran over somebody's child or something like that in your car by accident, maybe. And you're certainly going to feel a lot of pain and a lot of sorrow, and you don't necessarily have to feel guilty about it, but there's certainly a lot of pain associated with it, I think, at least for a while anyway, or a lot of sorrow. And I wouldn't call all that guilt. Or even if it was a different kind of thing where you did something intentionally and you just saw the pain that the action causes. That's just seeing, like Tom was saying, A causes B and B is painful. So, it doesn't have to be guilt to see that kind of thing.
So
Yeah.
guilt. Go ahead.
What I'm hearing, what you're saying is that the memory of doing this, whatever it was, this guilt, prevents you from doing similar things now. But it appears as if maybe you didn't really, is there something really pain-producing about the action that you just don't want to participate in because it's pain-producing, not because it causes you guilt or something. So I wonder if, kind of what Stu was saying, can you just see very clearly that this is an action that causes pain, that it brings up something you don't want to put somebody through?
As it comes up.
Just very simply. But now it's like you're almost saying, well, the guilt keeps me from doing it. Whereas perhaps the guilt, if you could just see that that's the case, you just wouldn't want to tread in that water. You just wouldn't do it.
Or maybe it's not guilt you're talking about at all.
Maybe your definition of guilt is different.
Yeah, I've always kind of been confused about what guilt is. I guess guilt is like a self-deriding kind of feeling that, I don't know. I know I felt guilty. I think I felt guilty, but, it's...
Yeah, that's just, from my background,
Uh-huh.
I know what guilt is. I don't have any question about Guilt that I feel that my parents, or my mother tries real hard not to, but my father was expert. And it was one word said in a way that completely made me feel like I had done something wrong. Like daughters are supposed to visit their fathers. Okay? There's, if you weren't brought up with that, then and you brought up with the word guilt, in your environment, then it would be harder perhaps to understand what at least some of the other people I've heard talk about are coming from similar places as I am. The guilt is very clearly heavy thing you carry around and gets in the way rather than just seeing. I mean, when you're talking about what you said, Jim, I'm hearing that you really weren't guilty. You were seeing that it was something you wish you hadn't done, and that you just weren't going to do it again. And that it was a strong feeling, but it wasn't like you were making yourself feel like you were a bad person, and
So
that you carried around this image of yourself as a bad person in your heart.
That's where the guilty thing gets in. That
Guilty
you
does.
judge yourself, and then you kind of go back and say, oh, I'm no good because I've done this, and this. And
Yeah, and it builds. I mean, because there are thousands of times in childhood when you've got guilt-producing parents that it's real hard, not to feel guilty a lot.
Jim did mention, he said that the memory of this prevented him from doing something now, which still strikes me as being a conditioning thing. It's like this thing in the past that caused you pain, that you should not going to do that again. And the temptation to do it is held in check by this memory. And what Stu said about time, that it seems in my experience that, who knows, whatever the situation happens, that there's a response, and immediately this guilt, I don't know, the word's not too important, but there's some kind of feeling of shouldn't. That, and that can come just, like that.
The memory.
The action that's happening isn't seen. It's immediately covered over by this thing, this shouldn't. And it may hold it in check, but it'll never resolve it. It'll never get seen. That the desire, the want, this reaching for the pleasure, whatever it is that is the temptation to do, is not seen because it's being continually held in check by this guilt or memory or whatever it is.
Well, the other thing that does is you classify things into the same, let's say that you have this memory of having done something, even if you're not guilty about it, but you remember that A produced B, painful situation, and now there's another situation and you say, I remember that, if I'm going to do that, this can be very painful because it's what happened last time, and perhaps it isn't, but if you're remembering what happened last time, then it's harder to see the immediate situation. But it should be possible to see something there and see that it's going to produce pain, even without remembering that it was similar to something that happened before.
Along the same lines, sometimes if you label something guilty, then you don't feel what you're feeling. It's triggered this word that you're guilty, but it's not what the feelings are right then. And then being able to see what's going on right then. It's the word guilt, there's this guilt. And that seems like that one.
But there are instances too, like maybe I'm in a situation where I can see, well, this might cause some pain in somebody, but for one reason or another I go ahead and do it anyhow. Maybe it's not enough pain, and maybe the advantage is enough so that I do it, and I still do that. I mean, there's always that trade-off. And so I guess it's to degrees too that I don't know.
But at such a time, why doesn't the memory function then? If memory has this, as you said, positive function of preventing something. So sometimes you say it works, sometimes it doesn't
Well,
work.
not in this particular, like, well, let's say, I don't know what if I can pick an example right now, but where maybe in a work situation, you can do something where it will lead to your advantage and to someone else's disadvantage for one reason or another. And you could easily forego your advantage to forego this other person's disadvantage. I can't really think of a good thing right now.
But why would you do a thing like that? Because of ideas, I'm a good person or I'm a bad person if I don't do it? Or is the situation clear as it is?
Practicality, I guess, because I think in a lot of situations, there's no real black and white as far as, there's always going to be a little, it's always going to be a little messy, so to speak.
A little,
Huh?
yes, I didn't hear.
Messy, or you're never going to be clearly in the right or clearly in the wrong. I mean, I'm thinking of carpentry and contracting where, well, I can do it this way, and this is really the right way to do it, but it's going to take me 2 more hours, so I'm just going to slap it up and cover it up, and they're never going to know the difference. Maybe, So,
Did he work in the store?
He was a much different person then.
but
But in either case,
that,
there's self-image. In one case, I'll have an advantage for myself, save myself 2 hours, and in the other case, I'm going to be a good person and do this thoroughly. And is that the only alternative we have, either to conform to the bad image and not worry about guilt feelings, or to conform to the good image and then have reward from that? Is that how we operate? And maybe this is how we operate, but is this the only way?
You said a minute ago something about as it comes up. You just sort of dropped that phrasing. And
Yes,
I take it you meant by that looking at it as it comes up.
as it comes up, yes.
That's the problem. I don't know how to do that. As a matter of fact, it's like there's sort of two me's. There's the me that is sitting, listening to you people here, or is in meeting with you, Toni, or is listening to one of your talks or something. Then there's the me that, is outside of this room doing all the regular stuff I usually do. And that's where I don't know how to, and it's like I'm divided into two people, and it's me that's outside of situations like this. It doesn't know how to look at things. Doesn't know how to work with the stuff that comes up inside of me. And so what that means is that this stuff that we're doing, this work, tends to be on the real periphery of my life instead of in the center of my life as a kind of an active examination. And I don't really know what to do about that because I feel completely run by the, just sort of the usual motives that are inside of me all the time, like wanting to seem like a somebody, or that's maybe the biggest thing. I'm just so completely run by all of that all the time that what it gets down to is that, in terms of looking at stuff in the midst of what's going on all the time, I don't really care, I'm not really all that interested in it. I'm so preoccupied with trying to, I don't know, maintain my, sort of cool, but I just don't do it. I get really frustrated about that fact that that's the way it is, and I don't know. I mean, my sort of wish is that I can't do it by myself. I guess I need your people's help. That's part of it, because we're in this organization.
If you don't care, why do you need help?
What?
If if you really don't care? You say in your daily life.
Well, I feel really split into, wishing I could and in the midst of it not really being all that interested in it. And I don't know how to resolve this problem,
Haven't you ever gotten interested while you're in the midst of it? Just occasionally, every once in a while, you be in your, what you call your mainstream life or whatever, and going about your business, and then you see, yep, there it is again, I'm doing it, and, or something, and you do get interested, and just, looking at that, what is this? I think I hear you real loud.
Yeah, sometimes I tend to kind of sit back and try to figure it out. But in terms of getting engaged in it so that it, like sometimes you can do when you're sitting, so that you're really engaged in it with it on a gut level. I almost never do that. And yet, as I understand it, that's, that's the reason for the frustration. Obviously this is like an expectation that I'm holding over myself, which makes me angry,
And guilty.
And guilty, yeah.
That you ought to be looking.
I ought to be, yeah.
One thing, Chris, it strikes me that I don't think there's any person here that, doesn't feel the same way, really. What I like to be doing is watching TV and, putting up a video. Let's face it, that's kind of,
I'm not even sure if that's what Chris is saying.
But,
you're just saying even your just day-to-day life, it seems, it's so honest what you're saying right now, that you want, you see, and there is, obviously there's looking going on, because you wouldn't be saying what you're saying if there wasn't. To see that there's this lack of interest, lack of seriousness.
Well, why do you call it lack of interest or lack of seriousness, though? It seems like you give yourself a split there when you say, well, here I care about it, but out there I don't care about it at all, I could care less. You could also say, just look at what are the fears, say, that are so strong that I'm caring about something else. I'm caring about how people perceive me. I just need so much for people to think I'm okay. And that just becomes overwhelming. And everything I do is driven by that need to feel like I'm okay,
That's it, exactly.
So what is that? Where is the not caring there? There's tremendous caring. There's, and you can look at, by caring, it's not, there's no apathy going on there. It's just that you have some image about yourself or whatever that fuels a fear or a insecurity or whatever. I shouldn't say you. We. It seems like it can be kind of put in a certain. There's a way of putting it that makes it seem even more hopeless, or makes you feel, when you split yourself like that. When we do that, it sometimes makes it harder to see what we're doing.
The actual work that you do.
I'm trying to simplify this whole question. Does it come down to why doesn't one change? Why isn't there change in one's life? And one sees working here or something or whatever, then one just finds oneself carrying, day to day his usual stuff, and one just, like you say, sits back at a point and just, what's the reason? Why isn't there some fundamental change in one's life?
Well, I don't know. I'm just sort of feeling my way forward. I know that I'm really passive about looking at things, on the day-to-day level. And I wish, I don't know how exactly, I wish I could kind of more actively do that more actively instead of feeling run by the usual motives. But the bottom line is that I haven't figured out how to do that. I don't know how to do that. So I usually just feel guilty and forget about it.
It's that in itself a problem that you have this idea that there must be a way of doing that, and I haven't found that yet. And
Yeah, it's just,
until I
it's-
find that way, there's nothing I can do. And so maybe the problem is this idea that there must be a way in which I can do this, which in itself is already a split.
Also perhaps that other people.
no, wait, hold it. What do you mean a split?
In the future, or sometime other than this instant, I'm going to have a way, or maybe I'll never have a way of looking at it, but the idea that there is a way of doing this, some kind of a technique, or how did you put it? You said, I don't know how to do that. The implication being that there is a way of having this seeing, which I don't have now. And this whole way of thinking and feeling about it is already prevents attending to what is going on. You slip into that pattern of thinking about it.
Well, okay, I guess the thing is that I'm so preoccupied with that pattern of thinking that you're just describing.
Why are you so preoccupied with that?
Because I don't know how to do anything else.
But is the pattern then giving you some security, some existence?
I mean, I don't know how to sort of, I don't know how to describe it. I don't know how to step away from that and look at things instead. Oh,
But the stepping away from it, looking at it, is idea. That there is a way of stepping away from
right,
this. And
okay, I don't know how,
Well, need to use words.
Chris, do you have an idea that it's going to happen all at once? That there's going to all of a sudden be a day when you look at it all the time? Or because it's like one time, 10 minutes, half an hour after it's happened. And then maybe the next time the same thing, 25 minutes after it's happened. And getting closer to seeing it when it happens. It's not necessarily something that anybody can do. I mean, I get the sense that there's this idea that you need to be doing it immediately
Yeah,
in this
well,
particular way.
I guess the thing is that I have so many ideas in my mind about what I should be doing. And that's so much, that engages me so much more than anything else, that I don't know how to instead look at things. That's maybe the key thing.
What comes to your mind when you say look at things? What is it that you're not doing day to day that you think you should be doing or wish you could be doing? What is it? What does that involve, that looking at things when you say that?
Well, I guess, being able to work with conditioning so that it has increasingly less control over me is what I'm talking about. Toni has a zillion times used this expression from moment to moment, and has become kind of this sort of standard that I've held over myself.
What is it from moment to moment, though? Is it like this sort of equanimity and total presence, and you're just right there? Is that like what should be there that isn't there, or something?
I don't even know exactly. I don't even get it.
If you could forget about what everybody said up to this moment, about anything, what do you want? Just looking right now, forget about what Toni said, but what is it that one wants?
I'd sort of like to know more what's happening, how you see the situation rather than you continually asking me questions. Do you people get into the same bag?
Absolutely.
I only made half of my point. The second thing I was going to say about that is, I was just wondering if there's this idea of what it means to be with it, and because you're so wrapped up in all this stuff, when all this stuff is going on, then gee, we're not sitting here, we're not behaving in this complete presence and total moment-to-moment being there kind of state. Maybe that moment-to-moment being there state is just noticing the fear that drives me when I'm feeling that way, you know, and how horrible it feels. It doesn't have anything to do with being totally cool and present, and I wish I could be like I think Toni is, or whatever it might be, you know. But just here's that horrible insecurity, and here I am making the dumb joke that will give me a little attention, and maybe people like me because they're laughing or something, or whatever that is, and that's it right there, you know, without there needing to be anything different. Just seeing that that's what's happening.
You follow that?
Maybe that's not clear.
No, I definitely heard what you said. I definitely heard what you said.
You also make a distinction between being here or whatever, in the sitting room, or sitting and looking and listening to talks and being in meetings, and then your daily life, and you seem to feel like there's this gap, or you know, why can't I have the same type of attention I do at those times while I'm out doing my job and stuff? It's a good question. You know, maybe what are the ingredients that allow a certain kind of presence or awareness or attention while you're at a sitting that is not happening when you're not? I mean, you could do things perhaps to make it a little easier for you to pay attention, or be more quiet, or so. I don't know why, but
I don't know either.
well, but
What's the quality of attention when you're sitting? When one's sitting, is there just what's coming up, or is there someone that wants to change what is seen, or that gets involved in what is seen? We can't just assume that we carry on what we're doing here outside. We're not even sure about what we're doing here either. And somebody pointed out, I think it was the last retreat or whatever, that it was really kind of awakening thing that somebody saw that they thought they knew what attention was, and I think it was pointed out at a talk that they realized that they didn't know what it was, what attention and awareness was.
Yeah, I mean,
So
my own
we can't
feeling is,
assume.
I'd like to kind of start, if I could, I'd sort of like to start my relationship with this organization all over from the beginning. And not, you know, you see what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah, what I said before about what you want, I didn't mean, you know, about this. What I meant also was that, I mean, we all come here with so many things, so many ideas, and with so much conditioning, not just of our own upbringing, but of what quote-unquote spiritual work's about, our own past relationships with Zen centers, or all this type of thing. But it just doesn't seem to be a bad idea, as something I think you're going through anyway, you know, maybe we all are going through at one point or another, just really starting from scratch. You know, if there's some way to sort of like just look at where one's at, and what gut thing really puts one here to do this, and then you just sort of used to clean away some of
I don't want this to sound negative, but one of the problems that I've had with Toni's talks and the things that she's written in the newsletter is that it seems to me there's kind of an underlying assumption that the person listening to what she says or reading what she says wants to do this work. But to be completely honest with myself, I haven't reached that point, you know. A lot of me doesn't want to do it. I've never gone through whatever happens to kind of discover that really deep down that it's a good idea. You know, maybe I'm not putting this in the right language, but
when you say this work, what do you
you know, but I have this feeling somehow that I personally have to gradually, actively discover for myself there's something valuable about doing this. And instead of just sort of continuing in this kind of,
Have some motivation.
you know, nowhere sort of empty continuation of the past, you know, where I'm kind of taking over someone else's, Tony's ideas or somebody else's ideas about what I'm supposed to be doing here. That, you know, I somehow have to personally, actively, gradually discover this is worth doing. As
You yourself.
yeah, personally,
Yeah.
myself, yeah.
I'm going
What
through
is the
a very
self
similar
that one?
thing these days. Sometimes I just don't want to do it. It's just very clear to me. And to first admit that was very difficult for me because that's like, it undermined everything that I thought I was doing and supposed to be doing. But there are times when I just don't give a shit. And to be able to just see that I don't care and then just not care, that was really helpful for me. Because the fact is, there are times when I care a lot. And
But what's the difference? I mean, what's the difference from the times when you care and the times you don't care? Does that make any difference to what you call this work? I mean, you know, who wants to do this? I mean, you know.
See, Chris, isn't that also part of the same conundrum? Is that,
Were you done?
oh, I'm sorry.
Bob?
Yeah.
We're going very fast with responses, just to sort of let something be said and listen to it for a while, but I jump in myself.
I kind of feel that we're all in this together. And I sense that a lot of the time it's the feeling that we're not. You know, it's the feeling that unique, or that anyone that's giant is unique in these feelings. My experience says that's not true, that we're not unique in these experiences, in these feelings. And the other crazy thing is that there's an implication somehow that you can know what you're doing. Maybe you feel that you don't know, but I don't see that either. I don't feel I know any more about what I'm doing now than I did 10 years ago. There's been changes. I feel a lot clearer and cleaner than sometimes I do. But I don't know any more about what I'm doing. In fact, I know less.
Chris, you mentioned, oh, I'm sorry.
I remember.
What do you feel clearer about?
What?
What do you feel clearer about if you don't know what you're doing?
I guess I'm less worried about the fact that I don't know what I'm doing. Less caught up in sometime, then less caught up in sense of needing to know and needing to accomplish and stuff. But in terms of this idea of, really having a grip on this thing and forging ahead and I wake up in the morning feeling like, sometimes that's what's there. I mean, the tendency is to run away from it, just as staring, what the hell, it's there to run away from it. And it's very, very difficult to figure out. See, there's the tendency to want to do that, figure it out. That's there. And to be able to get up and walk around and do the work and just be with that is very difficult. Immediately somebody will, I know somebody will get up and too, and the two are, great. Immediately there's more defenses and fears and I don't know. How do we break those things down? How do we allow ourselves to get up and just be what's there at that moment? It's total mystery.
Peter, you said that being with that, is very difficult. Is it very difficult always? Is it very difficult now? Was it more difficult in the past? I mean, is it an idea that it's very difficult that makes it worse?
They're all words. I mean, when you're with it, whatever that means, I mean, if you get up in the morning and you just out, and it's not very difficult at all. No. Falling down the stairs is a very easy thing to do.
As long as you don't keep grabbing and trying not to do it.
Well, that may be an appropriate response, though. But the fact is, what I'm saying is I really don't know what all that stuff is at all. I really don't have a clue.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that if we think, because it's not just Peter, but something is very difficult, then it makes it very difficult because you have the idea.
I read a while ago or heard, I'm not sure, but anyway, it's something about Zen practice, or just trying to work on ourselves, and it was by someone who was a so-called teacher, and it was really helpful because what this person said was that for every, no matter how so-called advanced or whatever, anyone who's working on themselves is, the whole practice is coming back to practice. That everybody is slipping and sliding. And that for me that was really helpful. It was like, oh, you mean that guy too is coming back. Just keep coming back to paying attention, or however you want to call it, to what's going on. There's always moving away and pain and getting lost and, being really angry with Emily, or, and then the next moment it's trying to see that she was just being her age and herself, and it was my attention about what she was doing, and then things change again. But there's losing temper and getting angry and, just being impatient and all these other things, and getting lost in that, and just, getting upset because the dishes are piling up, and there they go again, and not wanting to do them. And having all this stuff, and then realizing, and letting that drop, and then seeing again, and paying attention again to those feelings. And I don't know if that's helpful, Chris. I just, that's the way it is. That's the way I found it to be, and I found it real helpful to hear it from, those particular words. Everybody's practice being coming back to.
And there is no easy method to get to do that.
Mm-hmm.
There's no device you can employ.
There's no trick of a trade.
But that's really going a little too far, I think, in the sense that it's, when you're lost, you're lost, and then when you see what's going on, then you see what's going on. And if you then put on top of that, it's nice to know that everybody gets lost, and so now I'm back, and you see what I'm saying? That
Yeah,
I mean, why do you have to go past just getting lost and getting unlost, or
Well, I guess because we're trying, Chris asked for help, and so I'm trying to find words from my experience that have helped me. That's what I'm doing. I mean,
But what does that help? I mean, what does it help to, does it make you feel good about practicing that, oh, well, I'm not a complete dodo, somebody
It makes me
else.
feel okay about myself. It makes me feel like I'm part of the human race, because sometimes I get caught up in feeling that I'm special and I get all involved with me, and that, God, I'm such a bad person, I can't keep practicing the way I want to. So I hear somebody who seems to have a lot of clarity. I mean, you happen to be Aiken Roshi, but I mean, just hear something or read something that seems to be really clear, and it clicks for me. And I say, huh, this is okay going back and forth. And I don't lay, so next time when I'm feeling really crummy and then I go back, I'm being guilty. It helps me deal with my feelings for me, a healthier way.
The memory of that, what you have read, we're back to something we talked about
Sometimes,
before.
yeah. Sometimes
In
it's
other
the
words, the
memories.
memory of that sentence is inspiring.
Yeah.
It makes you feel good about yourself, which means it helps the good self-image.
Yeah.
But does that help to see what you're doing? Or are you caught
Yeah,
up then in
no, I
image?
don't. I feel like it really helps. For me, it helps with the
But
clarity.
you have to look carefully. I'm not attacking you or anything. To look, what is it that it has really been helped? Is it sort of a gush of energy because one feels good about oneself, which is one way? Or is there really clarity without saying I'm really just like everybody else, or other people are just as dodo as he said? These are ideas which give us good feelings, but at that moment we're caught in ideas. It's not the clarity of just being in it.
But the need for those feelings for me, when that happens, when that comes up, is because I need something, because I'm getting into guilt. So that's one of the things that I do for me, is to help stop the guilt. It becomes a game of thoughts, perhaps. I mean,
But does it help you understand guilt thoroughly? As it happens, what that is, if you don't elevate yourself out of it through memory of some helpful sentence in the past, that again prevents you from facing what's actually going on in this moment. Is it an escape again? One has to look at it.
Yeah, I guess the way it feels to me when I'm remembering now, the way it's felt, is that it's a helpful tool at the time to stop me from punishing myself unnecessarily, and it helps me bring me back to a place where I can more clearly see and feel what I'm feeling without the thoughts that get me into this hole of guilt and feeling like I should be doing something. It's a tool that helps me get out of that hole and go on with more clarity.
But maybe that hole, maybe that's not really getting out of it. I mean, maybe it's just pushing it aside. So, I mean, maybe you really need to get into that hole.
I guess I don't feel like doing that.
You've been there enough.
I have lived there, I have been in therapy, I have done a lot of stuff getting into the feeling, of that stuff. And right now, I'd rather just see it and go on. And, I mean, that's a preference for how I would like to live. It's not that I'm not looking at it, it's just that I don't want to drown in it. And, it's very easy you get so drowned. I mean, that's what we're talking about here, is drowning in these negative feelings, so you can't go on. I mean, you're just doing these dishes and feeling lousy that you just yelled at your kid, and you can, carry that till she goes to bed, and then you've never had a resolution. You've never dropped it.
But if you see in an instant, like you've been yelling at your kid, and you see, oh my God, what have I been doing? I've been completely lost it. Then why does there have to be something else? I mean, at that moment...
There isn't at that moment, Bob, but there are times when that doesn't happen. Okay? There are times, there's the whole range of times. I mean, that's what I was kind of trying to explain before about this 30-minute thing, and sometimes 30 minutes after the fact you see it or you feel it and you understand it. I mean, sometimes it gets closer, but, a lot of times it doesn't happen. I mean, ideally...
Well, surely if you're able to remember that Aiken Roshi said, oh, well, you come back and forth from your practice, then surely you're able to have gotten out of that lost space that you were in. I mean, why does remembering that
But there's
This-
no memory for me right then. It's reality.
What's reality?
I'm not hearing his word. I mean, it's like at that moment I'm saying to myself, I'm going back and forth. I mean, I'm doing that. There's this, whatever this I is, it's a useful kind of thing for me that brings me out of a space that helps me step out of a space that
well, seeing that you're going back and forth isn't the tool. I mean, that's saying that you're going back and forth. So
I don't always see this all the time. This is not a mantra.
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I get the feeling, I mean, I do this all the time. I get the feeling that between the two of you, you're like kind of struggling over whether what is being done is right or wrong, you know. There's a certain, it seems to me that way.
No, it feels that way.
I mean, I do that all the time. And for me, it comes back to this question of, I guess, I don't know what I'm doing. That's what it comes down to.
I would like to say something on guilt. I feel like very much on edge here because I'm a volunteer worker here, and I'm really not acquainted with many of these spaces at all. But I've been thinking about guilt and how to phrase this little spiel that I've been rehearsing here for the last hour on guilt, so that I don't get attacked by 40 strangers. Okay. But I may be totally wrong, but I'm going to say this anyway. I think that guilt at one time did serve a useful function in my life. I believe that when I was much younger and growing up, that having feelings of guilt would prevent me in acting in a spontaneous way, so that if I grew up under parents who weren't open and direct and didn't have clear communication, and they tended to stockpile their feelings, so that when the final straw was put on the camel's back, they'd explode and just unleash a torrent of anger and threats. Well, if that's the case, that like say I track mud in, and my mother mentions it, but not much comes of it, she cleans it up, and then later on I turn the television dial up, the volume up, and they say it's too loud, turn it down. And then later on, let's say I leave my room a mess, and they say, your room's messy, you can clean it up, and so on and so forth. If I do these things and I keep doing these things that get them bothered, it may come to the point where they just explode, and they say, listen, you've been, it's like really intense anger, really loud. You trapped mud in, the television was up too loud, we're on the phone for half an hour, your room's a mess, and only it doesn't come out like this. It comes out like very threatening, and very angry, and very life endangering. Well, the key to it then is to come up with some kind of emotion that inhibits me from creating this list. Like, if I come tracking in mud, if that's the first thing, and I see my mother cleaning it up and I feel really guilty and really bad about inconveniencing my mother, then out of consideration for her, I'm not going to turn the television dial off. I'm not going to be on the telephone too long, and I'm not going to leave my room a mess. So, because I carry this guilt around for tracking in mud, I stop the rest of the list, and I prevent the explosion, or the final Holocaust, or however you want to call it. But the
thing about the actions. If the actions are important, and to the offended parties, ostensibly it always is the actions. It's always the list of actions that you get rid of. If I feel guilty about an action, and that action has stopped or concluded, that is, if I feel guilty about an action, and there was a domino effect where that action set in motion another action, and the final domino hasn't yet fallen, then perhaps there's a good reason to have that guilt. Maybe it will get me to interrupt the dominoes, to displace the dominoes so that it isn't carried on. And I can do something by having that guilt around. I might be spurred on to some action that will stop the terrible chain reaction from continuing on. But if I feel guilty about an action that has really concluded and that has stopped, then there's no reason for that guilt. And the only reason it might be there is that I'm just afraid again of doing some more wrong to that person. And then another image will be in that person's head. Because once the actions have concluded, it's only mental images in someone else's head that we can be concerned about. I mean, they're going to get one image of being insulted or hurt and stockpile that on top of another image. And then finally, because they're not clear and open communicators, because they're not immediate feedbackers, and they're not going to tell you, well, you did this, and I really think you should apologize. But if they just hold it in, then they're going to explode. And that's why the big explosion perhaps might look so lethal to a young child when the big explosion comes. And that's why it might be so urgent for us to prevent the big explosion by having guilt around. And so I would say that if it's not useful for us to have guilt anymore, and if when the big explosion comes, it's not going to be that lethal because we're not little children anymore, even though we may not really understand that. We're not as helpless as we may think. But if it's really not that urgent to have guilt anymore, we can either dismiss the guilt as a passing thought, or we can grab a hold of that guilt out of the stream of thought, hold it in our hands, and watch it evaporate. And we might go to a person that we think we've wronged or have imagined we've wronged and believe that person to be carrying around some grudge against us, and openly confront them and say, do you know about that instance there? And I feel so bad about it, and I was just wondering if I'd hurt you, or have you anything to say on that? And is there anything that I can do to make it up to you? Because I feel so bad about it. And then they'll feel so much better, I think, because if they had a grudge, it seems reasonable to me that it might be that it's based on their feeling that and somehow we discounted them. But by approaching them with a sincere apology, we undo that discount and we acknowledge their value and worth to ourselves. And so there isn't this stockpile list. They'll cross that transgression, at least that transgression will cross off the list. And so it'll be that much less likely that it'll explode. I think that as children, the reason we may not have been apologizers is that apology really had no use in it. It wasn't important that we tracked money, or that the television dial was up too loud, or that our rooms were messy, or that we were on the telephone for too long. Those were never important. But what was important was the lack of communication in that original environment, and the closed doors to feelings that just weren't expressed. And so any action, I mean, no matter what we did, if we did anything, we were damned for it. And it didn't make any, it couldn't have been of any use to apologize.
But there can be communication now.
There can be communication now, I hope, I don't know, because if I were convinced of that, I would be an open communicator, but I'm not, I'm very closed up, and yet I'm hoping that it's safe to come out now, but that's just a hope. So, I would say that if I can dare to, perhaps the only way to undo the conditioning is to confront it and ask it whether it really has use anymore by going into it instead of letting it pass off as a thought. Perhaps it's better now to grab a hold of these things and either they'll kill us or they won't. But I don't know. I think as far as guilt is concerned in my adult life, the thing to do might be to ask for people's forgiveness nowadays. So that's my thought.
Yeah, and can you just pick up with announcements? Do we feel ready to leave?
Anybody still want to say something? Ask something? We do have someone else.
Yeah, the talk next Sunday, it's the 18th, is cancelled, and so is the workshop on Saturday the 17th. There's a talk tomorrow in Rochester at the Friends Meeting House, and there's a discussion period a week later at the Meeting House on the Monday. That's 7:30. Good question. 7:30.
7:30 at the meeting house in Rochester. Friends Meeting House on Westminster.
It's 12:30. We're going to put the food out as soon as we can, I guess. There's a theater, a kids show down is it at the park? Down in Springwater?
Yes, it is.
So if anyone have kids, they might be interested. Actually, adults might be interested too. But that's at 1 o'clock, so